G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic weekend and a fantastic Sunday, and happy Mother's Day for all those mothers out there and the appreciation that we need to show for all of our mums. Now today we do have a fair bit to go over. We have a lot of footage and geolocations to look at as well of a number of strikes, both Russian and Ukrainian. We need to have a look at the maps, as the deep state has actually updated with some of the changes we know in some areas and some areas of which we weren't expecting, as well as, of course, we need to then talk about the North Group and Russia's push from the north of Ukraine pushing down into the Kharkiv Oblast and what is actually happening here. So look, we'll start on that, as I know that's what you're after in the title of the video. Is probably something clickbaity about this of Russia's collapsing or Ukraine's collapsing, or however YouTubers get the views these days. Anyway, of course, here is Ukraine in the center, the capital of Kyiv. The red areas occupied since 22, the purple since 2014. And of course, these green areas, this is areas where Russia has been at some point and has either been pushed out of these areas or withdrawn. In some cases, both. That will become important a little bit later. But we come into the Kharkiv Oblast, and of course we can see this large area of green here where Ukraine had that successful push in late 2022, lined up with Russia being all over the place at the time, and pushed back a long way in the Kharkiv Oblast, settling down at this border here, which hasn't moved dramatically for now well over a year. Now, Russia has launched some operations from the north here. Well, let's have a look at the map straight off the bat, and we'll talk about what we say and see is interesting in here. So, of course, this is what we saw on the 10th of May, the day after Russia celebrated Victory Day. Then we see the grey zone, then the grey zone increased to the 11th, and then today, importantly, we see this now turning red, and confirmation that Russia has occupied several areas in here. Now, there is geolocated footage which does show significant further pushes as well, but what needs to be shown is, because this has turned red by the Ukrainian map, this does mean that there is Russian occupation, not just presence like what is indicated typically by grey zone and fighting. Now, myself, many others, and we talk about this a lot in the Telegram, of which you should come and join the discussion. Yes, we take the piss a bit, but we also, I think we really do get some good ideas nutted out. But is this a deception plan to draw in Ukrainian reserves into here for a push somewhere else? We know for the last few months, Russia has been pushing in Donetsk and Bakhmut, trying, of course, to push further into the Donbass down in here, as well as pushes in the south, trying to reclaim territory of which Ukraine had then their spring-summer offensive last year. Now, many others have pointed to that, no, this is much larger than that. What this is to draw in Ukrainian assets and reserves. So not only troops, but assets as well, as there is a finite amount of men to fight, tanks to have, helicopters as well, to try then a Russian push on Odessa. Now, again, at this point in time, we don't know exactly what is going to happen here, but that there's no guarantees of any success or failures yet. Nothing in war is guaranteed. And many have said too that even Russia has multiple fallback plans here. That, yes, this isn't the main thrust or main push, but if Ukraine don't send in those reserves, then they may have a plan B to, okay, the reserves aren't there, let's keep pushing down. So we're not really sure. And anyone who says we know exactly what's happening here, I don't think even either side here know exactly what the end game plan is going to be here as well. But from what we have seen and what we've been told for now a couple of weeks by Ukrainian officials, Western media, Western sources, that there's somewhere between 30 and 80,000 troops built up in here. And we sure as hell have not seen that many troops cross anywhere near here. We've seen in the tens of POWs taken by Russians, it's the same sort of amount, maybe a bit less, taken by Ukraine, and a couple of vehicles burnt out and some drone strikes, but nowhere near the amount we'd see for a full push. So those that say this is full operation, no, definitely not being like that. What I think has been crossed now is more so light infantry with this support elements as well, to be, of course, artillery, electronic warfare, to have a bit of a reconnaissance here and not only see where some weak points may be and where they can go, but to feel out what Ukraine's reaction actually will be here. Now, I think the most dangerous outcome here could be if this is going to be Russia's main push and the Russian command has assessed that due to the defensive build-up in here by Ukraine, that it will only take 50,000 troops, let's say in the middle there of 50,000, then that tells us the situation here and the defensive works are much worse than we thought for Ukraine. But I think that is maybe less likely. We know the build-up here has been significant, and we've even had Zelensky up here looking at works, photographs of all that as well. But like I said, nothing here is guaranteed. So let's have a look at what's happening here and a little bit of footage as well. So, of course, this is the sign that we're seeing on the side of vehicles, and this will indicate the battle group North group. That is what we are presuming at the time. Now, we have some geolocated footage. I can't show you this footage, but it'll be on the Telegram if you'd like to come and join. And this is of a Ukrainian drone striking Russian infantry out here. Now, where then is this geolocated? This is geolocated to here. Now, we will zoom in on this specific area on the deep state map. It's a little bit more difficult to find as the road isn't really shown here, but it is this tree line right where my cursor is there that we know Russian infantry are present at this location. And I believe it's about 5.23, yep, 5.3 kilometers out. So we know that there is infantry that deep in. What we don't know is where the main Ukrainian defensive lines actually are. And they're not going to be sitting right on the border here. But it is interesting to see more footage like that coming out. And I guarantee a lot more of that will be coming out over the next few days. But like I said, nothing here is guaranteed to be successful or a failure. And nothing yet is a failure or success. We don't know. It'll come in time. But I see a lot of comparisons back to 2022. And I think that this isn't a real good comparison as so much has changed. This is much later in the war. You know, we're a year and a half on from that, 2 and a bit years into the war. And we have reached the attritional phase of war where both sides have dug in, and we're not seeing these huge sweeping parts of land like we saw in Kharkiv, both Russia one way in the beginning, then Ukraine the other way in late 22. That phase was the maneuver phase of warfare at the end of 22. And that is the last time we've seen successful maneuver warfare. And that then struck the beginning of the attritional dug-in warfare that now we are seeing. So I think comparing what happened in 2022 to now is missing the objective reality that Ukraine and Russia have improved in many ways. Ukraine has vastly improved its ability to use its drones and use of assets as well as training of soldiers, while Russia has vastly improved its strategic and tactical movements and employment of weapon systems. So we're not just going to see the same thing we saw back then. And like I said, we don't know where this main defensive dug-in line actually is yet. And it may be worth Ukraine having fighting withdrawals here, so hitting Russia but moving back to that then main defensive line element, withdrawing back to those better built up positions, sacrificing some land for, I guess, the bigger picture. This is what we saw Russia do when the Ukrainian forces moved into the Belgorod and Kursk Oblast. That yes, they had crossings at border checkpoints and other areas, but they fell back to then that defensive line, what sat at some areas 2 and some areas 10 kilometers behind the actual border here. And I think we may see similar up in this direction. But let's have a look at what different overall picture is being said by sources, Syriac, Deep State, everyone here. So we have then Deep State showing this, one of the videos in this unit of enemy infantry column moving south to the village of Morakovets. So, of course, this is down in here, somewhere south here. They didn't give the geolocation, but this is very similar to the area which we were looking right down in here of Russian infantry then on the move, and there's not that much coming out, but I guess there will be a hell of a lot more coming. Deep State then also said this: the enemy continues to activate the border of Kharkiv Oblast. This district, Russian soldiers actively occupied the villages in these directions, moving into red zone. So actively then occupied. Then they occupied other elements, of course, talking out into the other eastern crossing here. That said, Syriac is actually showing a third one in here. We'll talk about this. But saying the situation continues to get more complicated. The enemy is gradually bringing more and more forces into our territory. Infantry is constantly entering, advancing in groups to populated areas and trying to gain a foothold there, saturate and continue the movement. A small amount of equipment, artillery and aviation, as well as large activity of UAVs and electronic warfare are present in support. So, like we spoke about yesterday, in an attritional warfare, you have that like a bubble of influence. You don't want to move outside of your influence and protection of artillery and EW. Even if the opening is there to move 10 Ks or a couple of Ks, you don't want to take that. You want to still move in that. The defense forces are trying to stop the enemy causing damage. It is necessary to pay more attention to this region and finally establish communication, or the enemy will have even more success, which will lead to very negative consequences. Although the main task of the enemy is to divert attention from other areas. So they're saying that this is a diversion tactic as well. Without the introduction of reserves, the situation can become extremely dire. The enemy understands this, and the current situation increasingly forces the defense forces to interfere in this area. So what this is saying is what we sort of said earlier, that yes, this may be a diversion now, but if Ukraine doesn't divert those assets, then there may be plan B for Russia going, well, they're not diverting it. Let's actually then have a main thrust push here. Things can be flexible on operational pictures. And what Russia does next, I believe, is entirely going to be judged off what actually Ukraine does in reaction to this. So then let's have actual a compare of the maps as we show two different sources of maps. Now, as you can see straight off the bat, this is showing significantly different, although similar in some other areas. So it is still showing that there is some gap between the two red areas here, but at the same time, then showing here that it is closed up. So I believe this gap here is probably, well, if the Ukrainian map is showing Russian control, then yeah, but it is, sorry. Oh my God. I don't know why my side-to-side things don't work. Anyway, but it is showing different pushes in some different areas. But again, we'll just have to wait and see. These maps just show different. Anyway, 4 spearheads were opened by Russian army to penetrate into Kharkiv Oblast. So this first one is up in here. These 3 areas along here were taken by Russian forces. Secondly, Russian troops entered Zeleny. So this other crossing down here, which is shown still in this crossing. Thirdly, during last hours, Russian crossing into Zaristia, so down in here, as another, that is a deep penetration here by even the grey zone as well. And 4 localities of these were taken by Russians. Currently, an operation to capture Volchansk is taking place from 3 axes. So the take then, this Volchansk here, is by multiple axes trying to then take this location in here, and this is the first real major area coming up in here. So the maps are similar but showing different sorts of information. That's why we always use multiple and get some sort of in between of what is actually then occurring. Now, let's have a look at some more footage. So we have then this geolocation here. Now, what this is a tree line that is sitting just here, just out of then Kharkiv itself. And let's have a look at the distance here, as this will be an important distance. So 15 miles, 24 kilometers then behind the line, and 58 kilometers, 36 miles from Belgrade. Now, what is the footage being shown here? Now, what this footage is a strike on a Vampire system, multi-launch rocket system, being used by Ukraine. And this system is what Russia is saying has been launching multiple rockets into the Belgrade region. You can see this then launching off multiple systems here. And we'll have a look at Belgrade Oblast as soon as we know that has come under much shelling and much attack as well. And this all is part of why we talk about Putin has said that he wants to create a buffer zone. We've seen shelling in, we've seen the crossing of the Ukrainian-backed Russian forces, or the RDK, whatever you want to call it. I don't even know what to call it anymore. And that came out of we need then a buffer zone. So we see then this system that just launched, it's salvo this tree line here, and then we can see a missile then drop on it, and then a cook-off to us showing as close as possible that likely then hit that system, burning up in there. Now, we know there has been many more strikes against Belgorod as well. Now, this has been released. This was Kiev independent, but saying Russia says 1 killed, 29 injured in Ukrainian attack. That Ukraine does not usually comment on reported attacks against Belgorod, but the regional governor said that there were damage and casualties in the region, and we know there's much footage coming out of exactly that then happening there. And what we have said as well is there will be a lot of Russian shelling to try and soften up targets before movements into areas. And we talk about Volchansk here, which Russia will try and capture as the main area in just the initial front. And we have seen shelling like this occurring into Volchansk as well. We're not exactly sure what was actually thrown in to cause that then damage. Now, we did speak about as well just down and this bridge dam here, and we yesterday said, well, we don't exactly know what took it out because there are sources claiming it was Ukraine, others are claiming it was Russia. But like we said, look, it seems a bit too far away from any danger yet of Russia getting this, so it's most likely Russia has taken it out to try and prohibit Ukraine's sources to come into Volchansk here, because this is then the main road up here. And footage then, like I always say, footage comes out in this war, a day or two later. This is footage of a Russian strike then on this dam bridge here. There we go. And that was from the satellite imagery we saw yesterday of it there, and then it then down in the middle. And that does cause logistical issues for everything in this region. So exactly what means here yet? Look, I'd be a knob if I said I knew what the overall outcome was going to be here. No one yet knows what is going to happen here or what the Ukrainian reaction will be. We know that Ukraine can't risk not sending reserves here. What we don't know how many reserves Ukraine actually has as well. And is this straight pulling guys away from frontline areas and then supporting into here, or is there some reserve element? People will claim they know, but again, we don't know. Any numbers from Ukraine are kept incredibly close to their chest. But I thought this was interesting. I think there's some bits to learn out of this, what Tatargami says here. Many questions of how Russian forces cross the border so quickly. The answer is simple. The border is a grey zone, heavily surveilled, and hence doesn't have defensive structures. Instead, the defensive lines are positioned deeper within Ukrainian territory. This was the same as those Ukrainian-backed elements moving into Russia too. You don't have it right on the border. You've got some mines, you've got surveillance, and you've got border crossings, but it's not like you've just got tanks sitting all on the border. Manpower shortages compel Ukraine to avoid deploying large units along the border continuously, with fully stocked and ready for immediate use artillery. Placing defences directly on the border would result in Russian forces occupying vacated or sparsely manned trenches. So if you had all this stuff, Russia would then take it. Russians anticipate a significant social backlash, including panic, demands for resolution. The pressure aims to compel the redeployment of units from critical areas of Russian advances in Donbass. Meanwhile, Russian forces deploy infantry units incapable of deep fires. So this here is an element I think everyone is maybe not taking into account as much. The informational war, the social, the propaganda war is very, very important for a war where you're mobilizing citizens, convincing outside support of sending money and weapons in, especially then with next month, 15th and 16th in Switzerland, Ukraine having the peace conference and Ukraine trying to do an unpopular mobilization of men still within Ukraine, or pleas for men to come back from who have left Ukraine back in to potentially be mobilized and to volunteer for the forces. So of course, this paints a further picture, and as he says, significant backlash, panic and resolution. It will be in Ukraine's best interest to, show, hey, look, now we can close this up and push this back. So there may have to be some immediate action here and deployment in. So this is pressure on that. It's pressure on the peace summit, especially for anyone who's on the fence. It could also backlash and other countries go, right, let's give more as well. Like I said, we don't know the outcomes. We have no idea of the outcome of this war yet. No one knows. Yes, I know people on both sides of the spectrum, they have got the end goal in their head as 100%. This is where it's going to go. And then we'll find elements of information to fit that narrative of what the conclusion is. But nothing yet is guaranteed anywhere. And I think some outcomes are more likely than others. And I think the outcome that the both alt sides have is as unlikely as each other. Number 6, the situation is expected to evolve, with Russian forces deploying more units to penetrate additional border areas or to reinforce initial success. With our estimate of their force equivalent to 2 Russian corps, they can sustain this operation. Thus far, Russian forces have not breached the main Ukrainian defences, given the time required for Ukraine units to deploy to the area. It is premature to assess the overall success or failure of this incursion. We will continue to provide updates. So Russia may open then in other areas and try and stretch the Ukrainian defence more and more thin across the entire front line. I think that's what they're trying to do. I don't think they're looking for success in this area. They're looking for Ukraine to draw forces in for success in other frontline regions. Now let's have a look at a couple of strikes. Now we have had some large strikes of some choppers taken out, and then we'll have a look at the map too. So this is actually from a Ukrainian source here. Pretty big loss being confirmed. Russian forces hit and destroyed 2 Mi-24 attack helicopters and at least damaged a Mi-8 helicopter as well. Now, people are saying that this isn't a big loss. Ukraine doesn't have that many helicopters. We saw 2 taken out a while back, with a third maybe damaged by similar missile strikes, and at least 2 then taken out here as well. And these are important. These are important aircraft. So you see these 2. Now, this is said to be in the Zap Oblast. I haven't yet been able to find a geolocation of this, of 2 Mi-24s. And then we presume an Iskander strike or Tornado S has then hit these choppers here, presuming that these now have been completely destroyed. Remember, these are airframes. Airframes are much, much more sensitive. So you can see that taken out even from shrapnel. And then we can see that this is where the Mi-24s were, which are both destroyed, and that there is a Mi-8 back here. Now, what we don't know is we don't know the damage to this chopper here. But I will say, by seeing this not spooling up, that it may have sustained damage, because you think the first thing, once this is hit, you'd be trying to get that rotor moving and get out of there, of those choppers then sitting out in the open. And these are important assets and strikes and assets that we won't see replaced for an amount of time as well. Everything you need to do is add it. If this was the other way, how would your reaction then be? That's how you need to look at things. Now, there has been a HIMARS strike down in Donetsk city as well, reported to be against a 10-year celebration of forces here. Restaurant reportedly hosting a group of pro-Russian mercenaries and soldiers that were preparing for a rally for the anniversary of the People's Republic. That is from Ukrainian sources there reporting that. Other reports will just from Russian sources will say it was just a civilian target. But again, any targeting is so hard to know. That we can see then this HIMARS strike here and people then running away. But we can see there is some level of rally going on here. People in parts of camouflage, Russian flags, Soviet flags, etc. And then we can see the then destruction here to then the building. No update on casualties or whatever else has then occurred here. Now, this map, while all eyes have been over here, all the attention is here, I did say that it will trickle feed in updates from other areas. And this is today no different. We have then the deep state map has shown more like we have known now for at least a week of movement here up to 1.5 kilometers, talking about a mile in Krasnoyarivka. So it is good to see that this has finally updated on this map between yesterday and today. Now, the Russian movement wasn't this great over the last 24 hours. This is combining multiple days of movement here, and we don't actually have an update on this front by Syriac today. But what we do have, and I think it was History Legends spoke about this, sorry mate if I got this wrong, but Russia has been using these motorcycles a hell of a lot. And we see this more and more in other areas of warfare, electronic bikes, diesel motorbikes, of movement of these. Very light, highly maneuverable. So they're up here, and there was a guide just down to the bottom of your screen here as well. Highly maneuverable, likely will not set off a tank mine, but regardless, you're still on a much smaller footprint, than a larger vehicle. And these are operating around Krasnoyarivka and around that industrial facility here in the center as well. And Russia has been having success on then these motorbikes. And I've named this video the Russian Crusty Demons. But you can see pulling in and out, fast movement down these tracks as well. Wind, artillery and mines and thermal imaging. These have a much, much smaller footprint and are highly, highly mobile compared to any armor or vehicles on the front line. So we are seeing more of that, and so far it has proven, from what we've seen, to be fairly successful. Now, Matyinka, nothing shown on this map, but we have a Syriac map update here, and this does show a further push out to the east and south. So we see these two reservoirs here, and then this movement during the last week. Russian army re-entered again the areas which were previously abandoned in Horovka. The schools, Ukraine army retreated to the trench system located at the center of the locality to try to increase that push out from then this 2014 territory here in Donetsk. Then we have as well down in the south here, this is something not shown across any of the other maps, but I'll call this sort of the Ugledar front here. This push up here of about 1 kilometer here, making territory. We know that this area down here in this support road, this is coming under more and more threat due to the pushes in Novomylivka, Matyinka as well, trying to close up that gap. Now, we don't have no more update anywhere else then on this map in the south. Where will then come is Pervomayski here. As we do know, there are some more updates here. In Pervomayski here, we see this push just out from Netelyov, which is shown very, very similar to these two maps here. Advance south of Netelyov, take control over then this poultry plant, as we know, most likely trying to push on prongs here to capture areas here. Then we'll come then into Bakhmut. Now we can see as well an update here, significant update coming around to the south of Chasiv Yar. This is lining up then perfectly with the Syriac map. After 10 days of combat, the Russian army re-entered again the Canal microdistrict from the adjacent forest. In addition, troops secured the last stretch of road from Ivanovsky to the water canal. Now, interestingly, this is showing actually more control on the deep state Ukrainian map. So in this, I'll say Syriac is out of date, significantly more control here. So this is the road and canal leading down here. See this curve? And it's saying it's way down here somewhere. So when the Ukrainian map is showing larger Russian movement than a other map, then we know that's probably then the movement there. But I hope that's a good overview of everything that we are seeing up and down the movement up here. No one knows yet. People that say they know, don't listen to them, because no one bloody knows. Anyway, legends. Look after yourselves, and I'll speak to you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.